My sister Goldie.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, I got her.
Okay, my sister Goldie was not with us in Krakow because my mother's side of the family comes from Munkachevo. Munkach or Munkachevo was a little town in Czechoslovakia which became Hungary during the war. So it wasn't Hungary. And her side of the family lived there for many generations. And every year in the summertime, she would take us kids to go to her side of the family, spend the summer in Munkac. In the winter, we would come back to Krakow, where my father was running the business, and spend winter and go to school in Krakow. That was going on every year. But in 1939, there was a lot of unrest because Munkac became, from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and anyone who was Polish citizens was ordered to leave. Goldie was the only one whose papers were not in order, so she somehow remained there with her grandparents. So the only ones living now in Niepolomice, that little town, was my sister, Lola, my older brother, Moishi, and my sister, Lola, myself, my little brother, Tuli, and my parents. Now, we all moved into this hut. It was a farmhouse with a sash roof, and it had two big rooms. One room was for us, and the landlord lived in the other one. He was a farmer, apple orchard farmer. He lived on the other side. Now, between the two rooms, there was an oven, a baking oven, because everyone would bake their own bread, I guess, in those little communities. When my future brother-in-law, Michael, realizing what happened to my father, that he lost all his money, he has a family of 6 here now to feed, and not a penny. It's not like he can go out and get a job because no one was allowed to hire a Jewish person. Consequently, what he did was a very noble thing. He brought my father a sack full of flour, 100 pounds of flour, figuring that my father will at least be able to bake some bread for the family to eat, not to starve. Well, when he also brought him, along with the flour, he brought him salt. It's a Jewish custom when you move into an apartment to give flour, a little bit flour or bread and salt. Okay? So my father took the flour, instead of baking bread, he started to bake pretzels. He was making pretzels with the salt on top, and he took these pretzels to the neighboring bars, taverns in the area, and they never saw that before. It was a big novelty. So he started to sell these pretzels, and that's how he started to make a living. And from the pretzels, he went into cookies, and then to rolled cakes, and all kind of different baked goods, and eventually for Passover, matzah. He was making matzah for the community. He became a baker. Never baked in his life. Where he got this idea. And among all these bakings, he also baked Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot is it's like a Jewish biscotti, okay? Very similar, but it's not as hard as a biscotti, or, a little softer. That he made that, and I was approximately about 12 years old at the time. We only lived in this one room. So we had the bakery in this one room, we ate, we slept, everything in this one room. And I remember baking with my father all these things. He baked chalis and bread. He became a baker. It didn't last very long. But while he was doing it, at least we were able to eat and, and earn a few dollars. My sister Lola and me were married, Michael, and she moved out of the house. My older brother, Moishi, married, and he moved out of the house. Now it's only the four of us, my parents and my little brother and I, are left in the house. This was going on for a while. Now my sister Lola and her husband moved into an apartment after they got married, which was a duplex, the owner of which was the mayor of that little town, Neapolomice. So the mayor told Michael, at that time my brother-in-law, one day, he says, "Michael, I hear some rumors. Something is going to happen to the Jewish people here tonight or tomorrow night. So go save yourselves." That very night, all of us snuck out from the apartment in the middle of the night with whatever we can carry, and he made arrangements for a horse and a driver, a wagon and a driver, to meet us down the road a few blocks away. We got on that wagon and we were going someplace. We didn't know where. And along with our family, all of us, plus Michael's mother and his sisters were also among them. Michael's father was killed about 3 months earlier. What happened, the Germans came around and they pointed to some man. They said, "We need you to dig some ditches," and he was chosen. They gave him a shovel and they took him away. Then we found out they took him to the forest and they made them, a few men, a truckload of men, they made them dig their own ditches, and then they shot everybody and threw them into the ditch. So now the mother and the sisters and some other relatives, we're all going on that wagon. The closest town that we can go to was called Bochnia. Bochnia was a mid-sized city, and Bochnia had a ghetto. So we had no choice, either stay or go to Bochnia. We had to go into Bochnia because it was the closest place. We decided to go into that ghetto. It's easy to get into a ghetto, you can't get out, but to go in is no problem. Anyone willing, especially if you have a Star of David, they let you in. Excuse me.
What if you could spell the name of that town?
Yeah. Bochnia is spelled B-O-C-H-N-I-A. Bochnia.
Thank you.
Now, they got into this ghetto even though they knew the atrocities that have been committed inside that ghetto. What atrocities? It seems like every so often 3 or 4 trucks would pull inside the ghetto in the middle of the night, like dump trucks, and they would go from house to house and pull out the children from their beds and throw them into that dump truck. Well, you can imagine what went on there when the parents saw these Nazis walk in there and pull out their babies, their children from the bed, threw them into a truck, and the parents were being beaten up, and the kids were screaming, and the parents were screaming, our children. After they filled up 3 or 4 trucks, they would then start to pull out of the ghetto with the kids. And obviously the parents were running behind the trucks, and the kids were screaming for the parents screaming for the children. And those cultured, civilized people had machine guns on the end of these trucks, and they opened up machine gun fire and mowed down the parents in front of their children who were running behind, crying for their kids. Well, those stories resonated throughout Europe. I mean, word got out that Bosnia, my God, they were doing terrible things. They're taking children out of their beds and they're taking... No one ever knew what happened to these kids. We never heard from them again. We can imagine what happened to them. So now we're going into that ghetto. It's like going into the flames of a fire. But we had no choice. So we had to do it. We go into this ghetto, and it just so happened that Michael had a capo. Capo is a Jewish policeman who were appointed by the Nazis. They had a Jewish police station inside the ghetto. Their job was to keep order inside the ghetto. They were not wearing weapons or anything like that. And many of them, and they were treated well. They had good housing and good food and all that. But many of them were chosen by the Nazis. You, and you, this is what we want you to do. You know, they select people. They saw you were healthy enough and strong enough, they would put you there. So he knew a couple of these policemen who he went to school with them, and they found us places to live. So they found Michael, that's Michael, and Lola, and her mother, and the rest of the family. They found a place, and my father and I, my little brother and I, we were placed in a room. To give you an idea how the living conditions were in the ghetto, there were 12 of us in one room. And all we had for furniture was boxes. We had a little table there, and no beds. All we had is straw on the ground. We put blankets over the straw, and this is where we slept. All 12 of us. They had one piece of furniture, a commode, a beautiful commode, and it was a little out of place there, because that commode you can hang up your coat inside, you know, very nice shafe, they call it in Jewish, shafe. And that commode will have a specific meaning. In a little while you'll find out what happened. We're in this ghetto for a few months. Living conditions are awful. All people who can work had to work. Most of them were taken out of the ghetto to work in factories or dig ditches or whatever the Germans told them to do. They would order the Jewish policemen to give them 100 people to dig a ditch. It was their job to round up these people and walk out the ghetto with them and guard them. That was what was happening.
Did they have like selections to point out people where they go or what they do?
Well, not at that point, but they did have it. You'll find out soon. They did have selections. Now, one day, this one policeman, his name is Farber. Farber is a friend of Michael. He says, Michael, something is going to happen here tonight. Go save yourselves. Do something, hide. And Michael's telling it to us, and word got out. Everybody knew that there's something is going to happen tonight, okay? But ever since those episodes with those trucks and the children, every apartment and every house had a hiding place. They call it bunkers. Each one had a place to hide. Some of them were in an attic, others were under the floor, others were in a wall, some place to hide the family. That night, sure enough, they surrounded the ghetto. And of course, we had our hiding place where we lived. Now, I don't know about Lola yet. but where we lived, we had a hiding place. That shafis, that commode, that piece of furniture that I told you where you hang the coats, you opened up the front doors, the back panel would slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall big enough for 12 people to climb across, and the other side of the wall, between two walls of two buildings, there was room enough for 12 people to stand there. And then all we had to do is close up the back panel of the thing, close up the doors first and then the back panel, and put the codes all over the place there to hide it. And we were there and behind that wall. That night we heard all kind of screaming, shooting, dogs barking, and screaming, yelling what was going on, yelling by the Germans and yelling by the people and crying. And anyway, this was going on all night. Towards the morning it got quiet. So we ventured to come out of that hiding place. Well, you asked about selection. What they were doing on those raids when they would select people, younger people, and tell them to get into these trucks. And if you hesitate or anything, they would shoot you. Where they were taking you in those trucks, no one knows. But most people were hiding. And the loudspeakers were saying, if you're found hiding, you'll be shot on the spot. So a lot of people were being shot, and they came in with dogs, with police dogs, German shepherds, and they would sniff you out. When they would sniff you out, they'd pull you out and they would kill you right on the spot. Or these dogs would tear you apart into pieces. So when we came out of there, it was quiet. But what we saw in front of our eyes, it's a sight that's always going to be in front of me. When I sleep at night, I can't get it out of my sight. There were bodies, dead bodies all over. Some parts of bodies, a hand, an arm, a piece of an ear, you can't imagine, all over the place. Children, women holding on to their children, torn apart by the dogs. I can't even describe it. It was so horrible, so awesome. That sight. And there were people going around in push carts, picking up these bodies and parts of bodies, putting them on these push carts. And then they were taking them to a central area inside the ghetto. They had like a big plaza there. They took him to that place, and they were piling these bodies up one on top of another. And these cultured people would pour gasoline over them and light a bonfire while our brothers and sisters are being burned to death. It was just unbelievable what went on. Now, my sister Lola is telling her story, what happened to her and her hiding place. Her hiding place was a doghouse. They had a doghouse in the yard. When you removed the floor of the doghouse, there was a step ladder, and you can walk down into that bunker, and down below there was provisions for 7 people. Just room for 7 people to sleep, and food for 7 people, and water and all that, all prepared. And they were 7 in the family, including Michael and Lola. And just as they were about to go into that doghouse, one of the other capos, who wasn't such a nice capo, walks up. His name was Schiller. Schiller walks up with his mother and his sister. And he says to them, he says, look, I know about your doghouse hiding place here. Unless you take my mother and my sister along, I'm going to tell the authorities. Well, what are they supposed to do? There was a lot of wrangling going on because the mother said, let me stay out, and another sister, let me stay out. We're older, you young, newlyweds, you have your whole life in front of you. You go down. Anyway, Lola and Michael wouldn't hear of it, and they decided to walk away, and all the others went down. And they just walking the street. And as they're walking the street, this friendly couple, Farber, walks up to them and says, Lola, Michael, what are you doing walking? Don't you know what's just about to happen? So she tells them the story, what happened with their hiding place. Excuse me. Anyway, he says to her, don't worry, Michael, Lola, I have a place for you where my sister and her 2 children are hiding. There's room for you. Come with me. He took them to a leather factory, and above the leather factory they had a water tank. She says, my sister and her 2 children are inside a water tank. So go up there, the step ladder, that ladder, go up, and there's room for you. You lower yourself with a rope inside, and in the morning, when you hear this particular knock, a certain signal, you'll know the coast is clear, you can come out. Well, they did, and this is what they saw. They lowered themselves, they saw water. It was winter time, there was snow on the ground. Water up to their knees, and they saw his sister holding an infant. The infant, of course, had drugs given or something, so was sleeping, holding the infant and shaking like this. And the little girl holding on to the mother, knee deep in water. And they see little rats swimming around in the water, and they're nibbling at their feet. Well, what are you going to do? He had no choice. They went in there, and they kept kicking off those rats all the time. Michael picked up the little girl, Lola picked up the infant from the mother, and they were there all night, and they heard the same thing that we heard. Shooting, dogs barking, screaming, yelling, all going on all night long. Towards the morning, they heard that signal, all clear. They came out of there, and after they got themselves a little together with their frozen legs and got a little circulation, and they were now, the first thing Lola and Michael wanted to do is go to the doghouse to see what happened to their parents. And this is, now I told you Lola is an artist. She had that gift from the very beginning. So after the war, she put all these memories in pictures. And those pictures, by the way, are the originals in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. We only have copies, but she donated the originals there. So this is what she found.
Yeah, hold that a little bit.
This is what she found.
Yeah, hold that a little bit. Hold it. Okay, I got a good shot of that. Wow.
She saw the doghouse there with the dog shot, and the whole family laying in the snow. Everybody shot, including his little sister, Marika, who had the birthday like a month earlier, and Lola made her a doll. She's still holding on to that little doll in her hand in the snow, dead.
Okay, go on.
Well, obviously Lola and Michael, Lola started to scream, and he stopped her. He says, they're still out there burning bodies. They're going to hear you. So quelching her cry, they were both sobbing quietly, and they knew what they had to do, because according to Jewish law, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within 24 hours. So Michael went around and he found a wheelbarrow. He found a wheelbarrow. And he put his family on that wheelbarrow. That's Michael and Lola. Little Marika, the little girl, is still holding on to the doll. You can see it on the wheelbarrow
You hold
there.
it forward a little. Not forward, not. Yeah. Okay, I got it now. Okay.
They took the wheelbarrow to the nearby cemetery in Bochnia. The Jewish cemetery was inside a ghetto, and they dug a grave. They were now burying the family. Now, this wasn't easy because the ground was frozen. They found one shovel, and most of it was dug with their own hand. Their hands were
Put your
all...
right hand back a little. The right hand only. So I'm picking up a big glare. Okay, right there. Okay, I think that's as good as I get that.
Most of this was dug with their raw hand, and it was full of blood, they were saying, because it was very tough to dig with the kind of shoes they had. It was very impossible to dig with that shovel. Anyway, after they put all these people into the ground, the family, all of a sudden this policeman walks up to them.
The capo?
The couple, the Jewish couple, walks up to them. His name is what did I say his name was? I think see, I forgot already. Anyway, that policeman, the one with the mother and the daughter, and he tells him, look, it wasn't my fault. And it probably wasn't, because his own mother and his own sister were killed. He says, the dogs must have sniffed the hiding place out in the doghouse, and everyone was shot. But he says, that grave that you just got through digging for your family, you're going to have to take everybody out, because I want that for my mother and my sister. Well, if you can imagine, they really had no choice. You do as he does, or else, he was threatening them. So they had to take everybody out, and they put him back on the wheelbarrow. They took him to another area near the fence of the cemetery. They found another spot, and they were digging the hole all over again. And while they're digging that hole, his name is Schiller, by the way, this couple. While they're digging the hole, they hear a jeep coming up the hill to the cemetery. And it came up and it stopped right at the gate of the cemetery. And out of the jeep came two SS men, and they were yelling, Moshe Schiller, Moshe Schiller. That was the name of this couple. And he said, Jawohl, here I am. They walk up to him, they pull out a pistol, and they shot him. We heard 2 shots, and that was the end of him. I guess they didn't want to leave any eyewitnesses, and he must have seen an awful lot of atrocities happening that day. This is what happened. They killed him right on the spot.